Where is America really when it comes to racism, sexism, and bias? Have we seen a meaningful shift to include Black people in the lifestyle sectors such as fashion, art, music, sports, and entertainment? How is the advertising industry portraying Black families? Is there bias in today's media?
Depiction of Black men and Black women in the family. You don't see that in everyday media images, whether it's ads or films. Or I think that's what we together are saying.
Constance C.R. White is the Senior Executive Director of the Social Justice Center at FIT. Ms. White is a fashion expert, the author of 2 books on Black style, including the inspiring and important How to Slay, and has written for the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Women's Wear Daily.
One of the wonderful things about the time we're living in now, one of the ways that we have made progress is that I think a lot more people are conscious of systemic racism.
Constance is passionate about the needs of Black women, and as editor-in-chief of Essence, chronicled the work of several strong Black women, including Michelle Obama, Rihanna, and Beyonce. Constance, thank you so much for sharing your personal story and addressing a topic that I know has been close to your heart for so many decades. It was a true honor having you as my guest on some future day. Constance C.R. White, welcome to Some Future Day.
Thank you, Marc Beckman. It's a pleasure to be here.
Constance, I've known you for so many years, decades, I think,
Yeah.
and I've never referred to you as Constance C.R. White. And I have to admit, I don't think I remember what CR stands for. What's the CR part of your name?
The CR are my middle initials given to me on my government papers, my birth certificate, Charmiane Rosalind. And I think my parents named me after, I think, people like who were appearing on screen at the time. I think of Rosalind Russell, I think of Constance and Allison Mackenzie. I have a sister named Allison. And for people who are experts or fans of vintage TV, Paint and Place. There were 2 characters in Paint and Place. One Constance Mackenzie, one Allison Mackenzie.
Oh, wow. So you and your sister have a lot to hold up to then. That's a big name.
Tone for, but okay, hold up to.
Yeah. Where were you born?
I was born in England and of Jamaican parents. And my Jamaican parents had immigrated from Jamaica, obviously, to England amidst the colonial outreach for people of the diaspora who they needed to come to England and work to help rebuild England after the war. And so my mom was a nurse. She trained as a nurse in England, and she practiced as a nurse in England, in Jamaica, and in the United States, and where I've lived now most of my life. And my dad was trained to be an electrical engineer, became an electrical engineer, and worked in England, and then took that skill set to his home in Jamaica to work for the Jamaica Public Service, which Jamaicans will recognize as an important part of the infrastructure of the country at the time.
That's so brave for them to, pick up and move like that, don't you think? Did you ever speak with them about that? Like what it took for them emotionally to leave everything behind and to move forward for a better life, to be more impactful?
I absolutely have, especially with my mother. My father died relatively young. I was in my 20s when my father died. And he was only 57, but they were both very active. They were activists in England and helped lay the groundwork. There's people who worked in the community and were groundbreakers. And I asked my mother, we had long discussions about what it took, as you said, for her and for my dad separately as part of what's now known as the Windrush generation to go to England and leave their families behind. And air travel was not easy or inexpensive in those days either. And then to build a life there and then move back to their home. My mother moved 2 or so years ahead of my father. And I talked to her about what it took for her as a woman with 5 children to then get up and move from England, where we lived relatively comfortably, to Jamaica. And, there were a lot of issues and challenges that arose because of some problems that happened. There's a whole other story. And my mother started writing a book, actually, about it. I remember when she told me, and she wrote in her book as I was reading her notes, and she said, they were faced with signs. A lot of times the early immigrants who were there, as I said, to help rebuild the country, were faced with signs which said, no niggers, no dogs, for rent. They wouldn't rent to anyone or anything in that category. So it was very difficult. And they rebuilt a life in Jamaica, which was their home. And then my parents divorced, and my mother, after years of raising us in Jamaica, moved to America, to Florida, to be exact. And she always talked about how grateful she was for the training of being a nurse, because that really helped her in all 3 countries in which she lived and contributed. It really helped her create a life for us, 5 kids, and for her.
Wow, that's an incredible story. I can't believe I've known you all these years and I've never heard that.
Now, few people know that story.
Well, thank you for sharing it. Now everybody's going to know it. But
Yes.
I feel like you have a lot of that in you. Like since I've known you, you've always been a big advocate for women's rights, for Black people's rights. I feel like, you've always been influenced with regards to a global vision. You're certainly not provincially focused on New York and New York fashion. So I wonder how much of your mom is in you? How much are those experiences a part of what's made you who you are today?
Probably more than I admit or am aware of. I mean, I think you're right. I know that I do believe I'm my mother's child. I do. And then obviously, maybe not so obviously, I'm also my father's child. But it's interesting when you think about each generation pushes against its previous generation. And I think about that in terms of my advocacy and activism for Black people and Black women, especially. And I didn't necessarily early on make the connection between my parents' work in England and when I started taking on that work myself. So, yeah, it's interesting that you say that. And I do think having lived in 3 different countries has definitely informed my viewpoint as a woman, in just living my life here now and as a journalist.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's hard, I think, when we live in a time with so much tension and friction, and you go back to the next generation, and clearly they had major problems. Some are just still sustaining till today. It's hard, I think, for an individual to conjure up feelings of positivity, of goodness. And, again, I've known you for a long time, and you're really like one of the kindest individuals I've met.
Oh,
Wondering,
thank
like,
you.
how do you find the energy then in the face of such adversity or challenges of this nature? How do you find the energy to be kind and level-headed with everyone around you? Is that also something that maybe you found a way to push through because of your mom?
Wow, Mark, you're taking me to places I have rarely, if never gone in interviews. I'm usually only speaking about fashion, but it's very interesting that you asked that. And I do appreciate the question because it gives me the chance to share with others. I'm a great believer in, we have to make a choice to be positive, to live positively. I'm a great believer in the goodness of every single person. Some have more goodness than others in terms of how they behave, how they act. And some people have the pain and challenges that life inevitably brings. They unfortunately have those things shape them to think negatively and be bad actors. I really believe we have to claim our joy, claim our lovability, if that's a word. If it's not, I just made it up. We are valuable, we're lovable, and we need to come from that place. We're here to realize our greatest selves, and we're here to help others. And yes, one of the things by osmosis I definitely took from my mother is, my mother, as I said, was a nurse, which is a very service-oriented profession, a very self-sacrificing profession. And I watched her minister to people, serve people. Particularly had the opportunity to do that when we lived in Jamaica, and I'd go out with her into the countryside, or if she was working the city. And it's a real job of great one-on-one service. And my mother was also extremely humble, and perhaps to a fault even. And I definitely, what that means is, I definitely absorbed that by osmosis, watching her. And what that means is, every other person is as important as you are. You're no more or no better than anyone else, and no one else is better than you. And we all need to, the healthier, more helpful thing is to operate from that place. And I think her humility really translates into positivity. And she was very positive to us 5 children, even when I'm divorced too in those days, even when we fell on very hard times financially. As you know, divorce 20 years ago and more, going backwards, was a game changer, a life changer, especially for women. And certainly my mother was in that group where, we went from really comfortable, solidly middle class lifestyle to one where my mother would scrounge around in her purse for lunch money, for literally trying to pull out the last penny to make sure we had enough money to buy lunch. A lot of times she didn't have it, and she would go to the school, and nurses were extremely, as were teachers, very respected. And, she would open up an account, IOU, like, I need for my kids to get a healthy lunch, especially my brothers who were playing sports. And she would say, would you open an account for me? And when she could pay it, she paid it little by little, paid it back little by little. So, all of that informed me, yes, to be mindful of people, and to, I think, be quite positive and open and accepting of others.
So, that's an incredible background. Thank you so much for sharing it. It's really, really inspirational too. It's interesting that you mentioned your mom has this writer's itch as well, because obviously your career in writing has been prolific, including the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and then, of course, the amazing book that you created, How to Slay, which is really, really one of a kind. But also reflecting back on it today and its content, you look at the history of Black fashion. You look at the impact on the history of Black fashion and culture, and how it permeates into from our streets into government, politics, music, art, and beyond. So it kind of is. It really does show that Constance White's global vision, global perspective. Can you take a minute and just talk a little bit about this amazing survey on Black style and fashion that you've created, How to Slay?
Thank you, Mark. And you were such an important part of that, getting that book published. It was, as I had the privilege and the pleasure of covering fashion, as you said, for a variety of publications and going around literally the world to cover fashion. It occurred to me that we were really, really leaving out the very important and impactful contributions of Black people. And so How to Slay came about was part of my life's work in terms of always trying to make sure that those contributions of African Americans and other Black people around the world were included in the work that I was doing as a writer, as an editor, as an image shaper and selector. And then the book was a look back. It had two purposes. It was one, a look back, so we could see, we'd have somewhere documented in one place some of the impact that Black people have had on fashion, because it's so often overlooked, and we're still in the process of trying to make space for that. And number two, I also secondarily, as you know, it's a beautiful coffee table book. And I also secondarily wanted to celebrate Black women and Black women's beauty and Black women's style. And so there are all these beautiful photographs, as you'll attest to, taken by...
Gorgeous.
Yes, Naomi Campbell, taken by Patrick Demarchelier. People, models you never heard of, or just Black women who are wearing gorgeous styles by everyone from Kevin Hall, a Black designer based in LA, who is a trailblazer and also worked at Halston as creative director, who is not as well known. And most
but fantastically talented and a great human being too.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then there are also the men, who Allen Iverson, who moved the culture in such a huge way. But it was important to me to also have that underlying theme and gift and informing on Black women as well in there, because image, that's a passion of mine. I'm not a social scientist, but image is one of the ways in which bias is expressed, and in which we can, on the flip side, on the positive side, use it to get to that place where we're all respecting each other and we're aware of our bias and we're working to end our bias. And while we talk about, of course, and have to, so important, job discrimination, access to education, access to clean water, all these things that impact our Black communities in very vivid daily life, we also need to talk about, acknowledge, and work toward using the image, seeing how image is used to bludgeon and other Black people and Black women in a particular way.
So can you give a specific example then when you talk about image, the use of images that ends up having, that causes bias at a ubiquitous level? Is there an iconic image of a Black woman, whether it's been in fashion or not, but a part of media that you can really focus on, that you would say, this image caused irreparable damage on a massive scale in America? It was put out there and it created bias against the Black community.
Oh, whoa. There are so many.
Yeah, give me one big iconic
images
of a woman, specifically of a Black woman.
Of a Black woman that caused specific bias on a... It's hard to, in this moment, say one
Yeah.
image
So open it up.
per se, but I'll do some descriptives.
Yeah.
For instance, when you look at it, one of the things is when you constantly look at the way Hollywood, television, movies center white women, center Black women with Eurocentric features, meaning the color of the skin, the shape of the nose, the type of the hair, the way that is centered is over and over and over again is very harmful to Black girls and Black women. If you're a girl, you grow up seeing those images over and over. You look at the way that videos, let's not leave out videos too, and you look at the way that Black women are frequently, for example, to use one example, frequently murdered in images, in a movie, in a TV show, in a video. I remember there was the Tuskegee Airmen film that was done.
Yeah.
Came out of Hollywood. Huge contribution on the face of it to the American history canon, and to huge contribution to acknowledging also the sacrifice of African Americans in the war. And this movie came out, all these, it starred about 4 or 5 Black men, and it included, a lot of white men too. And it also included a few women. And the women who were included were just a couple of white women. There were no Black women centered in this movie that about Black men serving the country so heroically. That's very damaging in and of itself. And it's very damaging when you see that kind of thing over and over again. Movies, there have been quite a few movies documenting the hip hop culture were made in that spirit, and they are very denigrating to Black women. Black women are made one of two things. Either they're invisible, like, oh, they didn't contribute anything, they weren't here, which of course is a big lie, or they are sidelined, they're denigrated.
Yeah, I think the denigration of Black women through the hip hop community is an interesting topic. It's something that Wynton Marsalis and I have spoke about a lot. He's really, really a big advocate against people denigrating Black women specifically within not just video format, but the lyrics of some of the hip hop songs. And
Thanks
I
for
think it's
mentioning
becoming
that, right? The lyrics too.
For sure. And I think it's becoming a generational issue. And I'm wondering that, like you, as a mother of a woman now who is not just intelligent and attractive, but also is a creator, she's a performer. What type of advice would you give for her to her generation and the next generation as far as inspiring them to move away from these types of images, from these types of messages? How important it is. Like, how would you guide your daughter's generation and the next generation as far as, overcoming this hurdle that results in widespread bias of Black women against Black women?
Well, I would say two things. One is, on a very human level, is know your worth. Know your own worth. Hopefully you're taught it in your home and your immediate community. But if you are not, if you don't get those messages, be your own teacher, be both the student and the teacher, and know your worth. Know that you are more than this. Know that, you were born worthy and beautiful. So that is the first thing, because there are things in life that are within our control, and there are things that are not. And then the second thing I would say is to be active. You may not be able to always 100% of your time be active, but be active, be involved in fighting it. And you know what, Mark? Be woke. woke means coming out of the Black community where, people have taken the word and tried to denigrate it as well, tried to sideline it and make it into something positive, but just because making it something negative rather, just because someone says it is doesn't mean it's so. It's a very positive, empowering word because it comes from a very positive, empowering concept that Black people needed to survive and people needed to survive, which is be aware of what the world is around you. And in this specific case, that's what woke means. That's all it means. And in the African American perspective, in the Black diaspora perspective, it's woke, it's consciousness. It's being conscious, understand how systemic racism works. One of the wonderful things about the time we're living in now, one of the ways that we have made progress is that I think a lot more people are conscious of systemic racism and how, oh, wait a minute, I didn't really see how all of this is woven into the fabric of our community, our societies that we built over decades and decades, hundreds of years. And so, when Black people say be woke, I would say to these, girls and then young women, be woke about what is happening. Like, you can wear your hair straight, but understand, and you may be doing it for very pure, innocent reasons. I want to change up my hairstyle. I want to have this look. But understand the Eurocentricity, the oppression of it, so that you can be free from it and you know why you're doing it. You're doing it from a point of empowerment for yourself, not disempowerment, and you don't even understand why you're doing it.
Yeah, that's incredible advice. And those are obviously super powerful words. I really appreciate you sharing them with me personally, too, as like a white guy. It's good to, learn a little bit, frankly. So I appreciate that. Going back to How to Slay, though, and image making, back to the issue of bias coming from, Hollywood and beyond. You really did a great job, I think, in overcoming and pushing images of strong Black women out there that are inspirational, that should push against that bias machine, that bias media machine that you're highlighting. I mean, to name a few, Rihanna, Michelle Obama, Beyonce. I mean, there are some real iconic individuals that are gorgeous and strong and enormously successful in different pillars, from entertainment and the arts to politics and beyond, as authors and really incredible people. Who would you say is, the most, let's say, iconic individual in the book throughout all of history? If you could pick one Black woman in How to Slay that really highlights that like amazing image, that amazing human being that pushes against the bias machine you're talking about, who would it be from the subjects that you examined in How to Slay?
Oh, whoa, that's an easy question. At first when you started the question, I thought to myself, I'm formulating an answer already, right? As you're speaking, and I'm thinking, Mark, I can't pick, you can't pick one woman, one person saying who embodies. I mean, there's so many beautiful, amazing, culture moving, society moving, shaking Black women out there but by the time you finished,
give me one from all of history. Go all the way back.
Well,
your book.
Well, in my book, which was modern history, which is in my book, it would have to be Michelle Obama. Now, bear in mind that in my book, as we said, there's Rihanna, there's Beyonce, there's Diana Ross, there's
even Josephine Baker,
there's Munya, there's Angela Davis,
brave
there's
people.
Salta Pepper. All these incredible women who are in my book. how to slay. But we'd have to say Michelle Obama, because of the way she has put herself forth, and she has helped to shape how we as Black women see ourselves. She has helped to shape how others see Black women. She's done, she picked up as her work as First Lady, helping veterans and Black men and women over index in terms of their participation in the armed forces. But she was working for everyone, regardless of color, all veterans' families. And she picked up nutrition, which is so important for obviously anyone's health, but it's particularly important in marginalized communities, which are food deserts, where this is an example of where we talk about, and people are awakening to the systemic racism that exists, that there are laws and behaviors and codes laid down for hundreds of years to disempower, disenfranchise Black people. And the system works one thing helping the other thing, right? So you get things like thinking, well, what does a food desert, people having good food have to do with racism and bias? Well, a lot. And so Michelle Obama, with these substantive issues she took on, she's a trained lawyer. So speaking of her career success, her professional success, speaking of her as a mother, as a daughter, as a wife, one of the ways that currently, very vividly, just started becoming more common in the past couple of years, that Black women are sidelined, is how Black women are portrayed in advertising from the point of view of relationships. So there are more number of Black women in ads over the past several years. That, and a part of that story. But when you think about the family, you think about the Black family, when you think about the romantic, everyone's having trouble now with romance, right? Relationship experts are one of the most popular.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah,
sure.
One of the most popular experts these days to tap.
I feel like they're trading snake oil, though.
Yeah, everyone's having trouble.
Right?
But Black women, often I started an informal study over the past 3 years, and I started it with the Super Bowl of 3 years ago. The number of ads that they include Black men, but ads that do not include Black women in a romantic relationship are huge, statistically very significant. And Black women see it, but I don't know if you, Mark, see it or would notice such a thing. I don't know, but that is something that is very common. And, so Black men get othered as someone to be afraid of, right? Like you're a thug, or you're scary. And Black women get othered. You can't really sell people on that very strongly. A little bit of that happens too, but you can't sell people on that very strongly because of the culture, the role that Black women have played in America, for even during slavery and before. They've been, they're nurturing, they're nurturers. They're going to take care of the family, whether it's as slaves or maids or something else, right? So they try to other Black women as not being desirable or in romantic relationships, particularly with Black men.
Yeah, I see it for sure. I know that there's been like an increasing amount of mixed relationships, multicultural types of backgrounds with regards to actors in ad campaigns now. I'm not sure what the motivation is there when they do that, frankly. I think it makes sense. I think we have more and more families that are blended together in this day and age, and that's fantastic. Obviously, I have a lot of personal friends and relationships with
Mhm.
children that have built families that are immensely amazing there. I think something you're touching on, though, when you talk about othering, which is important, is also the strength and power of a familial nucleus. And also something that I think has been marginalized for decades is the strength of the Black man in those families. Like, I honestly, Constance, I didn't expect to get into this type of a conversation with you,
No,
but
like, what are we going
and
to
we got to get into
about
fashion
the
because this is our
future of the
fashion
fashion
episode. But
business?
yeah, but just to like, since you raised the topic,
Uh-huh.
I really see, like, I have a lot of Black friends, men who are,
Yeah,
critical to their family and have,
absolutely.
as a result,
My
because
husband
they have a
is. I'll
strong
give him a
vision,
shout
they
out.
work hard, they are raising their children with inspirational words, putting them into places to be successful, whether it's academics or on the field, wherever it might be. And I feel like society has, generally speaking, beyond the advertising space, kind of pigeonholed Black men, and those strong Black men, those strong family oriented Black men, have really been, in my mind, at least, I guess I'm curious what you think, but in my mind, I think they've been marginalized.
Yeah, I think you raise an interesting point and a good point. That is true because I think, yes, and I can think about so many who you don't see a realistic depiction of Black men and Black women in the family. Let's just talk about that in relationships, just sticking to that for a moment. You don't see that in everyday media images, whether it's ads or films, or I think that's what we together are saying. And that's a problem because what does that look like? What does that look like for me as part of that group, right? So internally, how do you process that? And then how does that help society, the rest of society too, if you're not in that group? If you are, you're a white man, you're a white woman, you're Asian person, you're seeing this. My common experience is what you have described, right? And I think about my neighbors, I think about my brothers, I think about, my husband and so on. But I don't see that. It's far and far between depicted in the media. What does that then do to me? And what
I
does it do to the young woman or young
totally
man
agree.
who's
I totally agree. And then what does it do to communities at large? Because the truth, in my opinion, is that the power of a Black nuclear family and how they interact then with their neighbors and in the community, I think that's more powerful and more effective at pushing forward and being impactful with regards to topics that might be important to that community, whether it's healthcare or issues that are surrounding income or social justice topics, of course. I think that at that community level, at the ground level, you can be more impactful, similar to the way that like MLK impacted. He knew every single person in his church, what they needed, what those families wanted at the grassroots level, and pushed back up against the government. I think that the strong nuclear family concept, by the way, Black or white, right? Like really Black or white, the strong nuclear family concept is critical in creating strong community movements and then pushing up. I don't think we could just rely on like the federal government to be impactful for those needs that each community needs, right? Like I think it really starts at a local level with the family.
um I think it does. I think we do have to make room for, we know the NUCO family and the benefits of it, and how it is it's something that some people aspire to. I think we also do have to make room for different kinds of effective families, especially as we
Of
move
course.
forward, right? Whether it's the single mother or it's the increasingly too the single dad. We have to make room for those families too. I don't know if I certainly believe that there's a role for the government the government has to legislate and the government has to provide a safety net. In my opinion, I think because that's us as human beings. Like when you talk about community, that also is us. Who's the community? and how much resources does a community have without the government help? We have some, but I think what drives that is I think we have an obligation, a moral, social obligation to help those who are not as fortunate. And
For
some of it
sure.
is by dint of birth, right? Just, I think those of us who could call it that, more fortunate.
Yeah.
And then
I
I
think
think
empathy
there's,
matters for
again,
sure.
and then I think there's the second group, which is not born fortunate or unfortunate, but are discriminated against, or there's bias against, there's the system. I moved into a neighborhood because I wanted a better school for my oldest kid at the time. And I wanted a community where my kids could see other Black families as well. And it was I ended up choosing a very mixed community. I would say it tilted predominantly white, but it was a very mixed community. And all the white people are almost gone now. And I bring that up because that's part of that's systemic racism at work.
Wow. So going back to Michelle Obama and segueing into fashion, it's funny because we both spoke about this. We said we're not going to get into politics and all of these issues, and right. But Michelle Obama at the
Well, Gloria
DNC,
Steinem would say the political. I mean, two things. Gloria Steinem would say, right, the personal is political. But the second thing we also said, Mark, is we noted how, but you know what, fashion is in everything now. So
totally agree. But let's talk about Michelle Obama's fashion at the DNC. I mean, she wore Monts and her hair looked incredible. So you just highlighted her as like the most important, iconic person featured in How to Slay. But
yes,
let's use that as a segue. Let's use the DNC stage as a segue. I mean, she was definitely the winner when it comes to fashion for, 4 days of events. I'm sure you would agree. I'll let you answer that. But like, let's talk a little bit about what Michelle Obama put on as far as her fashion shows.
You might get some argument from fans of Elle, right? But
arguably, but Michelle Obama really killed it. I thought her Mont's outfit was like way ahead of the curve. Her hair was like a big statement, right?
Huge statement. She represented Black style on that stage. She represented, I'm sure, first and foremost, for most people, most Americans who were watching, she represented beauty. She represented, great American womanhood. She's someone who's involved, and she's someone who brings her whole self, with her to the public. And I think that's a real service. I think that's a real gift to us all. And she is her appearance, that with, the way her hair was styled, and who she is, who she presents as, was unapologetically Black style, and so powerful. And then to sort of the segue from what we were talking about before, then her husband rather follows her. Right? And as he said, like, oh no, and you saw that moment of, Black coupledom, Black love between them, very great. Cute on the stage and loving. And we just don't see that, we just don't see that enough. Nowadays, I'm surprised when I see it in the media, but it is all around me. So it's not fair to Black women, and it's not helpful to society to have this, very warped depiction of Black love and Black family, and negation of it.
So I think we're living in a time period that is certainly upside down, and the media is attracted to showing, fires and car crashes and blood, right? And that gets the headlines, and that gets the clicks, and it gets the money, and that creates sustainability. And I think that's part of the problem, right? They're not really showing the love because it's not, it's not attention getting, right? Sponsors
Well,
aren't looking for that.
I would push back on that, Mark, because my argument is, while everything you just said is true, they do show the flip side, and when it's shown, they're showing it, but it's predominantly white people. It's not, it's white love. It's not, you're not seeing black couples, you're seeing white couples, or you're seeing black men and white women, or you're seeing black men and Asian women, or you see a few Asian couples too, but you don't see. That's the point I want to make, is you don't see the black women depicted in a way that shows their desirability and their womanhood. Nowadays, I'm actually surprised and could make a much shorter list when I do see it, like in an ad or in the movies or something. It's like, oh, there's a black man and black woman in love. And by the way, one of them doesn't die at the end.
It's crazy. So like, it's interesting. Like you mentioned that you're like been doing like a little bit of an informal study. I'd love to take a look at that and see like what, if it's a minority, are we at like 2%, 3%? It's gotta be a small fraction. Just thinking off the top of my head, I see your point. I think it seems like an increase of mixed cultures coming together in these ad campaigns more so than anything, right? I think you got white on white, then white and mixed,
it is,
and then black
and that's wonderful, and it's relevant too, but it's tilted in one direction. It's like if you watch 10 ads with mixed couples, you're going to see, you're not going to see many black women. You will see black men, but you're not going to see a black man with a black woman, or a black woman with a white man. Or I've seen one or two of them recently popping up, but by and large, that's, statistically what they're showing, and that's a problem.
So Constance, you're like an image maker, right? Like your entire career putting people on the covers of, important magazines like Essence, creating books, and also as an image maker in the fashion space, are there other black women who are image makers that are echoing the sentiment, and anybody that's really being impactful with this type of vision? Like to push forward with this movement of, we need to have black women and black men, black people in campaigns. Like who else, which other image makers are doing a good job in the fashion space?
I like the word you use, push forward with this movement. We perhaps need to create a movement. There's not a movement. I don't hear people talking about it. When I bring it up, I'll bring it up to other black women. I even bring it up to some black men too, and they're very aware of it. The minute I bring it up, they're very aware of it. A few people frame it as rubbing out the black family is what they're trying to do. I always bring it up in terms of talking about black women in that role as, the romantic partner, the life partner. Some people frame it as it's an attack on the black family. So no, I don't know people. There are a lot of, great editors who are bringing more black women to the front, whether these are forefront, whether these are editors of media, our magazines, or ads, or they're casting videos. There's a lot of that going on. And that's good, right? That's been happening now for a few years. Black Lives Matter did make an impact, and we're seeing more of that.
Well, with Fashion Week upon us, and just looking at, the number of luxury brands that are run by white men compared to black men, and certainly black women, I mean, it dwarfs in comparison.
And white women.
So, right. So I wonder then, if the creative director is the visionary of these brands, like literally we could go through every single brand, and I'm sure you would agree. Like I don't, even know who, if you want to mention a few. I know Valentino has a Black creative director. I mean, we could go through it, and it's really not. I imagine you could probably count on one hand at this point, right? Like, it's pretty remarkable. So, if the creative directors have the power to drive forward the vision of the brand, not just starting with apparel and accessories, but the brand's position and campaigns, do you think that fashion could get over this hurdle of not depicting enough of
Mhm.
Black people in these
Fashion
settings, let's say?
and that fashion absolutely could help. Fashion is a culture driver. That's, one of the big changes that has happened with fashion over the last 10 years or so is fashion, and will continue into the future. I think it's one of the things that will define fashion in the future is that it has become and will continue to be a big culture driver. So fashion can certainly help. And this, let's not overlook the fact that this is something that impacts across all categories, right? You talk about food, shopping to get your groceries, shopping for a new windshield. And I bring that up for a reason. We're talking about automobile. Anyone who advertises, the creative directors of advertising companies, anyone who advertises is having an impact and can have a big impact to change this. Amidst fashion, ironically, I've seen an ad. I brought up windshield because Safe Light, a company that fixes windshields and is doing a lot of advertising on television recently, they stand out that they depict a Black couple just going about their business, getting their windshield fixed. And it stands out because it's so rare to see that. Dolce, ironically, I think it's Dolce & Gabbana has an ad where they depict a white male and a Black female to sell. They're selling their fragrance in this particular ad, and it also comes on television. I think that, fashion can absolutely be a part of, it would sort of be groundbreaking and pace setting to be a part of this change.
So beyond the topic of bias and racism and gender equality, unless you want to stay there, I'm happy to stay there,
Mhm.
really. But I'm curious, like, what's your perspective as far as the state of fashion now? Like, Fashion Week is here, and we're going to see
Right.
some exciting things with some of the biggest brands. Which brands do you think are, just generally speaking, creating the most compelling visions right now as it relates to apparel, accessories, fragrance, the ad campaigns? Like, who do you think are going to come out as the winners this fall as it relates to brands specifically?
Well, I think some of the fashion right now is going through a challenging time because we're in a time of, I've heard the word uncertainty used quite a bit, but I like to think of it as we're in a time of anxiety. And because fashion is growing, and the numbers, I think the most recent numbers for this year, and perhaps it will be true for 2025 too, but it's growing slowly, but somewhere between, say, 2 to 9%, depending on what you're looking at. And we're seeing a lot of the trends of yesteryear, and the things that drove fashion have been driving fashion for the last few years, uh, will continue to shape it. So I think the brands that have been successful in the last couple of years are going to continue to be so. You think about fast fashion is exploding. So Shein, on the one hand, it's a business too of extremes now. Right? You have brands like Shein, which are exploding and filling a need. And at the same time, you have the luxury market, which is doing quite well, not as well as it was a few years ago, but is doing quite well and will continue to, I think, continue to do well, because that's a direct direction the consumer is going in. So when you think about Louis Vuitton,
There's a real 1-2 punch there at
yes,
the
right,
leadership at
exactly.
Vuitton. We should talk about that a little bit. It's pretty
So,
amazing,
yes,
actually.
and Ralph Lauren, Tory Burch. These are brands that have been doing well, have been making their way against the headwinds, and there are headwinds in fashion. And I think they'll continue to be important. And then there's a whole bunch of independent emerging brands, which to one degree or another, some of them are going to get stronger and some of them are going to shake out.
Which emerging brands are you excited about?
I am very interested in Elena Velez. I like her point of view. Sergio Hudson is definitely someone I'm excited about and to watch. Christopher John Rogers is doing well. I'd say there are probably at least another 7 or 8 who are, I like Beckman a lot, like what he's doing to Sally Lapointe. Yeah, those are some of them, and there are more.
Let's go back to Vuitton for a minute, because I think it's really interesting when I talk about a 1-2 punch. It's like a creative director and an art director, and it's like this house that has, really shifted its culture and its mindset, maybe driven by commerce, maybe driven by other motives. But when Virgil was in place there, I think it was like the first step forward. The fact that Pharrell is playing a role there is important. I'm curious, like, what's your take on it? Let's start with, for example, do you think that Pharrell's perspective of that brand, his recent collaboration with Timberland, and how he's reinventing the front row to a certain extent, like, do you think that's a business model that most luxury houses should be taking on right now, or is it unique because Pharrell has always been kind of in fashion and stylish? He's got his own fashion brands and beyond.
I don't think it's unique. I think they, in terms of what they were looking for with a celebrity sheen to it, Pharrell was certainly a good pick in that context. The idea of replacing the creative director role with someone who didn't come up as a trained and experienced creative director, I don't know if it's something that we are going to see more of. I'm not sure. We certainly were all a little, or a lot of people were, to be fair, not everyone, a little concerned and, hands in the air about what does that mean, when Pharrell was saying, what does that mean for the future of designers / creative directors getting roles? But the celebritification, whatever that word would be, of just about everything is part of what this world is now. Yeah, I remember when celebrities started moving into media, right? And we all started thinking, wow, there goes our profession that we worked hard to perfect and work at every day. And a celebrity comes in and they get to, edit a magazine, or they start their own, and so on. It's now par for the course. Like, get ready. There is a celebrity who wants to do what you're doing and could replace you.
Right. But it's different today. It's like the celebrity is more than just an endorser, right? It's not just about putting Pharrell's name on, an incredible iconic handbag. I mean, he's impacting product design. He's impacting influencer marketing. He's impacting the front row in Paris. He's influencing ad campaigns, the music.
Yes.
It's so much more comprehensive than just, the old, like the way we were brought up with
Right.
an endorsement deal. Right?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, he is, in Pharrell's case at Louis Vuitton, he is bringing his, as Virgil did to which is who he replaced, did to a certain extent as well. Virgil was a trained architect, not someone who came up in fashion either in that way. And Pharrell, as you're saying, has brought his taste making, his point of view on things, which is big part of what a creative director does, is gives their point of view on a particular thing, a product. And yes, I would say that's true. Now, not everyone, and he was equipped to do that. That's another thing, not every celebrity wants that role or is equipped to do that role. Let's be real about that too. Some of them are busy making movies because that's what they do. And, they really leave the work to other people. I think influencers have really spurred this way of bringing life to a brand. The whole influencer economy has helped spur that, because now a lot of influencers have their brands or they have their edit, right? People pay them to come in and say, okay, do this capsule collection. We'll put your name on it. And they are very minimally involved. Some of them, they're like, this, right? And then others are.
The reality is that, like, the human spirit, even if you're a high profile celebrity, doesn't always equate to the skill set that someone like Pharrell carries, right? Pharrell has such an expansive, incredible skill set. I think another notable high profile celebrity that's done a masterful job in the fashion category is Rihanna. I mean, she just destroyed it in the beauty category, specifically with her range. I mean, superior product, innovative packaging design, and just brought together more than just her music fans. People buy that product because it's superior product.
Yeah, and he has a point of view on everything, and whatever it is she's putting out has her true, authentic stamp on it. Yeah, absolutely.
So, Constance, we end this show with a certain format. I don't know. Are you familiar with it? Do you know how my shows typically end? Okay. So I provide my guest with the beginning of a sentence and I ask them to end it for me. Are you ready to be put on the spot?
I guess.
Okay. So in some future day, American fashion will transform by.
In some future day, American fashion will transform by a combination of two disparate things. One is digitization, which, we didn't even touch on, like AI and all that's happening with that. But digitization, and as it becomes so hyper tech, at the same time, human beings will crave what is uniquely human, what makes us human. And so that real personification, the real personal touch will pull us back, if you will, or both things will need to exist simultaneously, and that will transform fashion.
Well said, my friend. I appreciate that. You nailed it. Constance, so grateful to have you as a guest today. Your personal stories are really incredible. I appreciate you opening up in such a personal way today. Incredible. I wish we had more time, but thank you so much. Maybe we'll come back for a second episode.
Yeah, and then we'll talk about fashion. Thank you, Mark. Right. It's been a pleasure being with you, and I appreciate the invitation and the time.
Really my pleasure. I know your time is very important, So thank you so much for joining me today. For ongoing insight surrounding these important topics, you can join the conversation on my social media channels, including Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Marc Beckman. And to sign up for my newsletter on Substack, you can find me at marcbeckman.substack.com. To make sure you don't miss a show, be sure to subscribe to Some Future Day across all major platforms worldwide, including YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. Special thanks to New York University for producing Some Future Day, and a big shout out to my producer extraordinaire, John Boomhofer, for being patient and always encouraging me to push through. Thanks a lot, John. Have a great day.